Leaders need to understand that when they are inviting their employees or the people they're trying to lead, if you're at a nonprofit or in ministry or anything, if you're trying to get people to do something, pointing over here and saying, let's go, will be way less effective than if you position the information that you're giving people as a story in which they get to be the hero of, and you're just there to guide them in that process.
Welcome to the Learn It All podcast, the show for today's leaders who want to get ahead and stay ahead, because we believe great leaders aren't born or made, they're always in the making. I'm your host, Damon, 3-time best-selling author and CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has helped upskill over 2 million people. I've got a great guest today. His name is Dr. JJ Peterson, and JJ was a former head of StoryBrand, where he worked with thousands of corporations and leaders to help turn complex ideas into clear and actionable stories. Today, he's the founder of Conscious Brand Agency and the host of the Badass Softy podcast. It's a show for leaders who are unapologetically ambitious, but lead with heart. During our conversation, JJ is going to share with us why he believes story is the most powerful way to move people to action. I love when we talk about narrative transformation, which is so important. It's the science of helping people see themselves inside a story. How great leaders combine both empathy and authority to build confidence in their team. And he's going to walk us through the famous StoryBrand framework and how you can use it both as a leader and as an organization. So JJ, I know you're super passionate about helping raise the next generation of leaders and really believe that in doing so, story can play a huge part. Why do you believe that?
So my background is in communication. So my undergrad was communication. My master's is actually in theology and the arts. So study of film and television and how to really tell story through that. And then my PhD is in marketing, in communication with an emphasis in narrative theory. And what I found through all my studies is, in its most basic, you boil it down, story is the most effective way to move people. Like, that's bottom line. If you want to change people's mind, if you want to move people to action, really, it has been proven over and over that story is the most effective way to do it. So through that, I've over my career, I've really tried to help people in different areas learn how to tell stories in a way that help move people forward to action, whether that is a leader who is trying to accomplish something with their team or a business that's trying to communicate their product to the market. I just believe, I know that story is the most effective way, and I believe that my role in life really has become about giving the good people the microphone. It's kind of what it comes down to, is there's great people who are trying to do great things, and there's great businesses who have products that people need in the market and can solve major problems. But when they cannot communicate clearly, people don't get the results of that. And so I teach people how to use story in order to get better results.
Sticking with the leaders for a second, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see great people who want to be, productive leaders really struggle with when it comes to communication?
A big piece of narrative theory is this idea of narrative transportation. Narrative transportation happens when we as an audience experience a good story and we put ourselves in that story. So when a movie is scary and we jump, that's narrative transportation. When we get goosebumps, that's narrative transportation. When people cry, narrative transportation, which I do in practically every movie.
What was the last one you cried in?
I am a little embarrassed to tell you, but I also believe in transparency and honesty, and it was K-pop Demon Hunter.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe you even bring that up. I have 2 kids under 8 years old, and that's all I hear about is K-pop Demon Hunter.
Oh my gosh. Our kids watched it, and they were like, you guys have to watch it. And I was like, no. And finally, one day we just sat down and watched it, and I was laughing and I was crying and I was like, this stupid movie does not deserve to be this good. And I am all in on K-pop Demon Hunter. And so, yes, that is the last movie that I cried in.
Okay, well, not to go way off board on this, but the last one, I'm pretty transparent too. The last one I cried in was Ruby the Rescue Dog or something like that.
Oh, I have not seen that. That will have have to be
Anyways, add
my
that to
next move.
your list. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's absolutely true.
It's
All
good.
right, continue on.
We're about authenticity and vulnerability here. Well, okay, so when that happens, when we experience joy or tears in a movie, we've experienced what is called narrative transportation. Now, the research shows that the higher levels of narrative transportation people experience, the more influence that story has on their thoughts and their actions. So, stories actually have the power to change the way we think and the way we act when we experience higher levels of narrative transportation. So, what I wanted to know was, how do you help people experience narrative transportation? I mean, if that really is the kind of ticking here, and there's really there's a 15-point scale that is used to kind of measure, but there's two primary things, two main things that determine whether somebody experiences narrative transportation or not. The first is, do we see ourselves in the story? Which it seems simple, right? That like the more we connect on a personal level with the story, the more influence it has. But on to that because I'm actually going to answer your question about leadership in just a second. I'm getting there. But we have to see ourselves in the story. And then the second thing is that the story has to have what's called fidelity and coherency. It needs to have some integrity to it. It needs to stick together, and it actually needs to follow some rules. So the two biggest influences are, can I see myself in the story? And does the story make sense? Does it follow the rules? Why I bring that up, and going back to the mistake leaders make in the story. So often when leaders are trying to communicate, trying to get people to move people to action, to accomplish some big task, let's put it into business context. They'll say things like, we need to hit our fourth quarter goals, you guys, so that we can actually hit our numbers this year. If that is the story I am telling my employees, we need to hit our fourth quarter goals so we can hit our numbers. How do I, as a worker, see myself in that story? I don't. This is the business's story. This is the leader's story. This is not my story. This has nothing to do with me. Oh, I'm going to work harder so I can get you recognition and make the company more money. I don't see myself in that story. Therefore, I am not experiencing narrative transportation. Therefore, it doesn't move me to action, right? So that's the first thing. Or let's say a leader gets up and says, here's the 12 different things that we're going to do over this next quarter to make sure that we meet our goals. Well, now the story's complicated. I don't know what the narrative is. There's no narrative arc here. It all doesn't stick together. I'm like, why are we doing this when really we should be doing this? And now the story has lost me from a fidelity and coherency perspective. When those two things happen, I can't see myself and I don't understand the story. It's too complicated. I'm not doing anything. I'm literally will not be moved to action because I have not experienced narrative transportation. So when leaders make the story about them, or they don't tell the story or and I'm not talking about telling like a fun story that's going to make you cry. I'm talking about inviting people into a narrative that they can see themselves in. If you stand up there and say, we need to hit our fourth quarter goals, I can't see myself in that narrative. If I can change that story to make the person listening the hero of that story, now they're going to experience narrative transportation because they can see themselves in the story. So I'll give a very simple example of this. This happened recently with a company I was working with, is they were trying to get all of their employees to fill out a form that just they needed to track all of the equipment that everybody had in the company. So what computer do you have? How old is it? The reason the company needed to do this was to be able to figure out, do they need to buy new equipment? Can they spend their budget for this year? What depreciation can they write off this year for taxes, right? We're getting in the last quarter. So they're trying, for the company, the story is really about, can we spend our budget and do we need to write anything off? What they kept saying to the employees is, hey, we need this, we need this, we need this, and they weren't filling it out. When they changed the story to, hey, many of you have equipment that is outdated and preventing you from being able to do work. We're getting a survey of all the equipment out there so we know who we need to buy new computers for. How many people do you think filled out the survey after that? Everybody's. So the difference between "we need you too" and "hey, for your benefit, we are trying to ask you" two different stories. And one, the company is the hero, the other, the employee is the hero. So leaders need to understand that when they are inviting their employees or the people they're trying to lead, if you're at a nonprofit or in ministry or anything, if you're trying to get people to do something, just standing up in front of them and pointing over here and saying, "Let's go," will be way less effective than if you position the information that you're giving people as a story in which they get to be the hero of, and you're just there to guide them in that process.
Yeah, so narrative transportation, and we're going to talk a lot more about this, the hero and the guide. But I just thought of this. I'm going to throw you on the spot. I don't even know if you have an answer to this. I don't know if you've seen the MIT study about 95% of AI projects failing. Um, and I bet a lot of them has to deal with leaders and founders and CEOs saying, hey, we need to get these AI projects to work. And think about what the employees are thinking. Where do I see myself in this story? I mean, how would you even position that?
Well, if you're talking about creating an AI project, right? There's a lot of different ways to do it, but the easiest and quickest is to position it as how does this benefit the employee, right? Not benefit the company. Start there. The other part is and it's not just about you're gonna get raises and you're going to get promotion and you're gonna make a lot of money. There is pieces of that, but for in some projects, that's not the case, right? It's like, "No, we need you to do your job, and you're not gonna get paid more or a raise because of that," is the reality. So in that even, you have to figure out how do I make the employee or the person that's working with me, the hero of this story? Well, you have to find out different motivations. What is it that they're looking for purpose? They're looking for camaraderie. They're looking for a team that they can be a part of that accomplishes something in the future. Now, if you use these tricks to just blow smoke and manipulate people, they'll figure it out really quickly and you'll lose trust. So it can't be made up. You can't just like fake it, go like, "Hey guys, we're changing the world," when you're not really changing the world. But when you can attach a project to something bigger than themselves, people can find meaning in that. It doesn't always have to be financial reward or status reward, as in getting a promotion. It can be about being a part of a community of people who are accomplishing something bigger than themselves, and they're doing it for the other people on their team because they love them. Even that. So just going, we got to get this deadline so that the ownership gets more money. No,
That's not
you're
going to
not,
work. Nobody cares.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can motivate people for a while with fear because they're afraid they're gonna get fired if but actually doing something great beyond that, forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully this would be true in the situation, but what I found is if you're sharing with your team to get behind a AI project, it is when this happens, it's going to free up your time to work on more important things and give you an opportunity to learn. They can kind of connect with that. Now, for the second one, the fallible one, I was listening to your brand new podcast. What's it called? Like the Badass Softy?
Badass softy, yeah.
Yeah, and it's great. And listeners, you got to check it out. But I kind of like the story in there about the Starbucks cup and how that just threw people off.
In Game of Thrones, in the final season of Game of Thrones, there is this scene, they're in this great banquet hall, and the camera, moves across the hall, and as it goes across, there's a Starbucks cup in the corner of this table. So even if you've never, watched Game of Thrones, don't know most people know it has to do with, like, medieval times and dragons, and a Starbucks cup does not belong in that world. It doesn't belong in that world. And so what happens when in regards to narrative transportation, when that happens, if I'm watching a movie and a Starbucks cup shows up in a medieval world, I'm pausing, I'm going, "Wait, what's that doing there? Why is that there?" And it doesn't matter if in that moment I was crying because it's an emotional scene or I'm moved, I'm out of that show. I'm now focused on the Starbucks cup. It breaks narrative transportation. So that's the second piece. The first piece is, can we see ourselves in the story? The second piece, does the story make sense? So if a story doesn't stick together, we actually come out of narrative transportation. Now, how that works in a leadership context is, if you're not communicating in a clear and thoughtful way that people can understand and follow, then that breaks narrative transportation as well. The impact or influence of that story will have less impact on people. So, like the example I kind of gave at the beginning was, if you give people 12 steps they need to follow, or here's the 15 things we're going to
You'll get
do,
lost.
they're done.
And JJ, one thing I want to just share with the audience is, because a lot of times with listeners is, a lot of times as a leader, you think that you're just throwing all this information at people and people are paying attention. You're not. People aren't. They're not even hearing, or you lose them.
Yeah. Really effective communication to me, when you're talking about a leadership role or a marketing role, is that effective communication, your message is about memorization. Your goal is to try to get people to memorize and internalize the message that you're giving them. So you want to keep things simple, very clear, hook them in the story, make them want to pay attention and understand why they need to pay attention to what you're about saying. There's a simple trick that it's called the rule of threes, that when we're giving information, you actually want to give a list of 3 things, because that's how our brain memorizes stuff. I'll get into that in just a second. But there's all these little things that are built into what we call the rule of stories that help people communicate clearly. So let me walk through a couple of those really quick, that helps people maintain what we call fidelity and coherency. So one of the things that makes people pay attention and makes us uh, uh, one of the things that makes us pay attention to a story and understand how a story deals with us is if you start with a problem. So when I get up on stage for any conference, I don't get up on stage and say, um, I don't get up on stage and go, "Hey guys, so happy to be here. Who's happy to be here?" And then everybody yells and you go, "That's not good enough." Like, no, I'm not, like, shoot me if somebody does that. No, I don't get up there. I don't introduce myself. I don't try to make a joke. I get up on stage and I say, "We're all here because we want to grow our business, but here's the problem. You're wasting millions of dollars on marketing and you don't even know it." Lean in, and you could hear a pin drop. Now, what the principle there, start with a problem, comes from is that in story, one of the rules is that the main character has to experience a problem very early in a narrative for it to be interesting, right? Think of every movie. It starts off, the character is there, they're calm, we get to know them a little bit, and then all of a sudden a meteor is going to come to Earth. And it's like, big problem, or their daughter gets kidnapped. Big problem.
Taken. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Big problem. Yeah.
Or the ring needs to be destroyed in Lord of the Rings, right? Like, if no problem appears in a story, we don't pay attention to that story. If it's just the main character walking around and life is great the whole time, that's a very boring movie. So the principle there is, in order to capture and hook the audience's attention, you have to have a big problem introduced early in the story for the main character. So when I'm on stage, what I'm doing is I'm identifying what is the problem that everybody in this audience is experiencing that I have the ability to solve. I start with that problem in my story, my narrative when I'm on the stage. And again, the story's not about me. So I'm not up there going, "When I was 12 years old," nope. I go, "You're here because you want to grow a business, and the problem is you're wasting millions and you don't even know it." Everybody starts paying attention then. That's the biggest piece, I would argue, of any. So going back to even the stuff of like a leader in a company trying to figure out how to get people to fill out a form about their computers. Don't start with fill out a form. Start with the problem they're experiencing that can be
I like that.
solved, right?
I like that.
So
Yeah.
that's the first principle in fidelity and coherency of a story. The rules of story is, start with your audience's problem, hook them into the narrative, because now everything you're going to say after that is related to that problem. The second principle, there's in the StoryBrand principle, there's really 7, but I'm kind of narrowing it down a little bit for the audience today. And the second principle I want people to pay attention to in leadership is this idea that you are the guide in the story, not the hero. Now, let me explain that for a second. When it comes to stories, there are really 4 main characters in any story: the hero, the victim, the villain, and the guide. And those characters exist in stories because they exist in us. So hero, villain, victim, guide. Let me talk about the villain for the victim for a second. The victim exists in a story to make the hero look good and the villain look bad. That's it. The story isn't about them. They are there to suck energy from those 2 characters, basically. And here's one thing I will just say for leaders: when we play the victim in a story, we're never going to write a good story, because
You give an example what that looks like in leadership.
in leadership, it's like, well, I can't believe they're doing this again. What am I supposed to do? That's playing the victim, right? And there are times, to be very honest, where we are victims, where people come in. But when we stay in that role, if we constantly are just complaining and backbiting and gossiping, it kills energy. And this is a statement about narrative theory. The story is never about the victim, and a victim who stays a victim will never write a good story. You will never write a good story with your life if you play the victim. What happens is, often as the victim then starts to move forward, the victim has a choice. There's kind of a path that breaks. They've experienced pain. A lot of times heroes in stories experience pain. That's true. Something bad happens to them, and that happens to all of us. But they come to a fork in the road where they get to decide, are they going to revenge that pain, which is to become a villain, or are they going to redeem that pain, which is become a hero? And that's really what the choice all of us have in leadership is. There's a lot of villain leaders out there, and what we have to realize is, in their backstory, there was some kind of pain that caused them to now cause pain to others. They are trying to revenge the pain that happened to them. Heroes work to redeem the pain. And good stories are written about heroes, the people who overcome and move forward. Villains, in most stories, villains die. So we don't want to be a villain in the story, right?
And don't you think a lot of villains too, probably some of the backstory is lack of confidence? I
Yeah,
think a lot of command and control leadership or title, which I think is the weakest way to lead, is just because you really don't have confidence in yourself, or you
100%.
want to, yeah.
And it was probably because of something in your past where you were bullied or you were made fun of, or when you weren't strong, somebody walked all over you. So their form of trying to overcome that is to cause pain to other people, revenge it, assert their power. But a hero in the story will actually work to redeem that. I was hurt, therefore I will choose not to hurt moving forward, right? That's a true hero story. So heroes and villains both work to overcome being a victim. One does it by causing pain, one does it by redeeming pain. And villains die, usually. And then heroes, when they truly continue to move forward, they evolve and they become a guide. So they become the person who actually then leads other heroes. A guide is actually the strongest character in the story. If you think in terms of a movie like Star Wars, it's Obi-Wan and Yoda. They're the guides. Luke Skywalker is the hero. But Luke Skywalker is really, in many ways, weak through the whole movie. He's up, he's down, he doubts himself, he's alone, he doesn't know if he has what it
He
takes.
complains, he kisses his own
Yes.
sister. I mean, come
Yeah,
on,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
But Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda stay solid through the whole thing. They're there to help him win. So in narrative terms, we all have the ability to play all of those roles in our life. Sometimes we are the victim, sometimes we are the villain, sometimes we are the hero, and sometimes we're a guide. In leadership, our goal, I believe, is to ultimately rise to that strongest character of being the guide. The strongest character is not the hero. Heroes are like one of the things I say to people all the time is just watch the next movie. The next movie you watch, I just want you to pause it at a random spot and ask yourself the question, is the hero having a good time right now? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. They're beat up, they're alone, they're insecure, they're overwhelmed, they don't know what they're doing. The guide is the steady force that helps keep moving the hero forward. So, in communication terms, going back to this, to kind of our grounding principle here with when it comes to leaders, the way you play the guide is by offering empathy and authority. Those are really the two characteristics that show up for guides is one, empathy. They understand the pain and the struggle that the hero is going through, but they've already overcome it and know a way forward. That's really it. So anytime you're in leadership, one of the things you have to do is put both of those things forward when you're talking. Start with empathy. I understand this is frustrating. I understand this is overwhelming. It was really overwhelming for me too when I started. Anything that you can move into that empathy space, you do. And then you have to establish some authority, some proof that you actually have the ability to move forward. In a company's terms, this would be like testimonies. Testimonies from other people prove that you have the ability to solve another customer's problem. In leadership, it can be about training or lessons you've learned or years of experience or your degrees that give
Or
you just
vulnerability, right? Mistakes you
vulnerability.
made.
Now, and that's a real big key on this is when you are a leader, you can show vulnerability from a communications perspective. You can show vulnerability in pretty much every area of your life except the area that you are leading people forward in. Now, let me pause for a second because sometimes that's controversial. So, if you and I are relating on being parents, we can talk all day long about how hard it is to be a parent. But if I'm trying to sell you my marketing services, what I can't do is walk in and go, man, AI is really screwing everybody over. I don't know how to do this. Like, I can't do that, even if I'm experiencing that. Now, what I can do is I can talk about vulnerability of my past self. You can talk about all the vulnerability in the marketing space about what when I started, this was really hard. I've been through this 5 different transitions using different tools, and I understand what that's like. When AI first came out, my brain was blown too, right? You can speak back to it, but you can't be a guide, a true guide, if in the moment you are still struggling with the exact same thing they're struggling with.
Well, then you're a victim, kind of, right?
Then you're back in this victim or the hero, right? And sometimes, like, I mean, it gets a little, gray of 2 of us as heroes kind of moving together, but in the basic principle, think about in this terms, like, if I walk into a gym and I go to a trainer and I say, "I wanna lose 30 pounds," and that trainer goes, "Huh, me too." That's not my guide. That's my buddy. We can be friends. We might be able to overcome it together as friends, but I'm not probably gonna pay that person money to go in that journey with me. They need to be ahead of me. But if I also go into that gym and they say, "I'm here to lose 30 pounds," and the next trainer just lifts up his shirt and shows me his six pack and goes, "Well, get off your butt, fatty." He has some authority there, but no empathy. I'm not following that person. But if the next trainer says, "I used to be 30 pounds overweight too, but I've actually figured out a way to keep it off, and I've helped about 100 other people do the same thing." Now we have empathy and authority together.
And even if you add into that, like, and I know how it feels to be overweight, and here's where we're going next. That is great, JJ, because from a client perspective, like with us, it's like we know what it's like when people are frustrated because their leaders are burnt out or not. We've seen that happen before, and you help them through that transformation, and you're also showing them that you've helped solve similar problems, so it's not your first
Yes,
rodeo.
exactly. Now, even you can say, "I was burned out." Like, you can actually the more you can relate to people, you can say now what you can't say is, "Hey, guys, can we cancel this meeting today because I am burned out currently, but I'm gonna help you not be burned out next week." It diminishes, and so, while vulnerability is really important to connect with people and have that empathy, the principle from a narrative perspective is the best type of guides include empathy and authority, but in the place that they are leading, they're helping the hero win. You don't show weakness in that area. Now, again, it's a little complicated because we're humans, but the reality is Dumbledore in Harry Potter can be confused about everything else, but he can't be confused about what it takes to make Harry a great wizard. Haymitch in Hunger Games can be a drunk. He can be messed up. His life is all over the place. But when it comes to winning the Hunger Games, he has to be confident. He can't walk in and go, well, whatever you want to do. No, he's very secure.
And you know why that's important? Because if somebody's working at this organization, right? And they have this leader up there who's basically sharing all kinds of weakness. People will be thinking to themselves in their head, hey, my mortgage counts on this. My family counts on this, and it just, I mean, you have to be authentic is what I hear you saying. But at the same point, you can't show that type of weakness in that specific area because you're going to lose your people.
Because then, you bring up an incredible point. Because if I'm the hero of my story, I mean, we all are, right? To be very honest, we are the main character in our own movies. So if I am the hero of my own story, I'm looking for guides. And when you show me a weakness in the area that I need help in, what you're showing me is you're not my guide. You're not in my story. So that's what leaders need to understand. Every person they're trying to lead out there is living their own story. And if you're trying to take them to over the next mountain, if you stand up there and go, I don't know how to get over this mountain, then they're going, well, we're going to die on the mountain. I need to find a different guide. So just kind of, I know we've talked a lot, but just to ground us back in some of these quick principles that I've been talking about is, as a leader, whenever you're trying to communicate something clearly to your audience, to your team, stand up and don't start with what you want them to do. Start with the problem you're going to help them overcome. Then position yourself with empathy and authority. That makes you the guide in their story so they can look to you to help them win. And then I'm going to give one more tip in this is you have to give them a clear plan. In a movie, I want to do a study about this of how many times the phrase is, what's the plan or here's the plan appears in a movie. It's almost every movie. At some point, things will be chaos, everything's out of control, and then they go, all right, what's the plan? And then you've seen it. They put down a map, they point here, they point here, It's so funny. I was watching the newest Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise. And if it's kind of a joke to me a little bit, when you're watching it, all of a sudden somebody on his team will repeat the plan to Tom Cruise. So they will say, so you're telling me we need to break into the CIA without being seen, steal the knock list, and then get out without being detected, sell it to the terrorists, and then get it back before anybody finds out. And then Tom Cruise will go, that's exactly what we have to do. And they'll go, well, that's impossible. It's like, yeah, that's the name of the movie, Mission Impossible, right? In the newest one, it happens like 4 times. There's like 4 different times where one of his teammates goes, so you're telling me we have to find a suitcase that's in the middle of this airport? And it's like, and they just are showing the audience that there's a clear path forward, no matter how complicated and overwhelming it is. There's a clear path forward for the hero to win. Well, same principles have to be applied when you're communicating to your team, to an audience, when you're giving a speech, is really you have to show, here's the 3 things that you need to be aware of or do in order to overcome the problem I just brought up at the beginning of this talk. Why 3? 3 is that you can use whatever system you want, to be honest, but this is a tip I'm giving everybody, is people memorize things in what's called the rule of 3s. Our brain views 3 as holistic and complete. So we wrap our brain around that information and memorize it much easier. So, for instance, when we have an emergency, we're supposed to dial 911. When we catch on fire, we're supposed to stop, drop, and roll, right? Like those things have been built into us, and we just think, oh, well, those are easy to memorize. They were designed to be easy to memorize by using three. In fact, our phone numbers, like I still remember my childhood home phone number. Nobody call this because my family doesn't live there anymore, but 503-838-6437. That's actually three numbers. It's not 10 numbers that I'm memorizing. I'm memorizing an area code, a city code, and a personal code. 503-838-6437. You can see this documented that was created intentionally to help us more easily remember phone numbers, because we're actually only memorizing three numbers, not 10. So when you give people three things, like it's why the 3-point sermon at church is very famous, because people memorize it much more easily. So when you as a leader are giving information to your team, or telling them what are the next steps we're going to have to take in order for them to win or for the team to win, the best way to do it is in threes. First, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. And that's it. You may have 20 things that you're going to do in the meantime that are part of that and built into the system. Doesn't matter. Give them three. They can see an easy path forward from there. So if you're communicating, when I say you want to be a good storyteller, what I'm not saying is you want to entertain people, you want to make people cry. Yes, that's all true. But really, you want people to be able to see themselves in the story, and you want it to make sense. If you follow those three principles, one, start with your audience, your team's problem. They see themselves in the story, why everything you're about to say matters to them. Then position yourself as a guide. What that does is show them the role you play in the story. And then three, give them a really clear plan. You're helping the story make sense so that they can memorize it in their brain, so they don't have to actually think about too many other things. So there's really, like I said, there's 7 principles, but if you pay attention to those 3, already you're better at helping your audience achieve narrative transportation.
Let me ask you, I got a couple questions. One is, does it always have to be a problem, or could it be a future state you want to be at?
A future state you want to be at is really like the climactic scene in a movie. So it comes at the end. So you want to leave. When I say that there's 7 elements, I'll just rattle them off really quick.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah.
I won't go into depth to all of them, but really the first one is it starts with you have a hero who wants something. So you have to understand. And again, these are all kind of based on movie and television, and actually the principles go all the way back to Aristotle and Plato. But in its most simple form, a good story has a character who wants something, who then encounters a problem, who meets a guide, who gives them a plan that calls them to action. That's really the step after plan. There's a moment heroes have to be called to action. And then there are stakes in the story that result in either success or failure. So those are the 7 elements: character, want, problem, guide, plan, call to action, success, and failure. So when you mention a future state, what that is in a narrative terms is you're casting a vision, putting positive stakes in the story, getting people to imagine what the future can be like. Those are usually paired with negative stakes. Something can be lost if the hero doesn't win.
That's 6 and 7, right?
Yep.
6 and 7?
Exactly. So in the grand scheme of, like, in a movie, we know if this meteor coming towards Earth is going to destroy the hero doesn't destroy the meteor before it gets there, everybody on Earth dies. That's the negative stakes. But the positive stakes are if they can destroy that meteor before it crosses a certain threshold, everybody lives happily ever after. Both of those have to be in the story, the positive and the negative. So when you're casting a vision, so I end often, the end of any talk is like, when you do this or when we come together as a team, can you imagine? And if you just start with that phrase as a leader, what that does is it forces you to cast a vision to your team of what the future can be like. Can you imagine when we're all done with this and your resume is going to be stronger? You're going to be super excited about this. You could take these skills and go anywhere you want to go after this. There going to be opportunity for raises. And on top of that, we're actually creating a great product that people can use and changes their lives. That's positive stakes. Then we could throw in some negatives. The reality is if we don't hit our mark and you don't put a ton in, if you're thinking in terms of a recipe for a loaf of bread, success is flour and failure is salt. You need a little bit of that failure, a little bit of the negative consequences, but
But you
if
got
you
to keep it simple.
keep it simple, that becomes too manipulative if you go heavy on the negative. So a little bit of negative and then go positive.
So I guess I was thinking about when you're saying that, it's kind of like JFK saying we want to put a person on the moon, right? So that's a positive. And then the negative could be if we don't do it, the Russians will do it first. And you don't have to go too much further than just say that.
Nope. And you keep it really, really simple. You don't go into all the things that the space program can do and develop for this country. It's just like, we're going to put a man on the moon. Keep it simple.
Yeah, I really like that. Now, if somebody is a new leader and they're moving into a role and they're trying to build credibility with their team and they're telling stories, how do they do it in a way where they could still keep it simple and show confidence and get people to believe in their credibility?
Yeah, if you're a new leader, then you lean a little bit more into the empathy than the authority. And in my opinion, I think what the mistake a lot of new leaders try to do is lean into their authority too much. They go in too quickly and talk about. I'll give you a real classic example. So I was on a soccer team one time where the coach who came in had qualified for the Olympics in rowing, and he was the star quarterback of his high school and then ultimately went on to a D1 school and played quarterback. He had never played soccer before. All he did the entire time was talking about examples of his Olympic rowing career and playing football at UW, at University of Washington. Now, in his mind, he was bringing in authority, but that authority was not authority to my story. I wanted to win as a soccer player. So because he was insecure about his lack of soccer skills, he talked about himself a lot, tried to establish a lot of authority. When I was on the Olympics, when I did that, and it was like, those are great stories, but that's not my story. In fact, it diminished him in my eyes because we're like, he doesn't know soccer. When instead, if he would have come in and used those same stories, but put them in a space that was talking about conditioning and being an athlete in general, now that's my story. So when it's okay to tell stories about yourself. Like if you did some great things and need to establish a little bit of authority, that's fantastic. Share that, but only share the ones that are in the context of the story of the people you're leading. If you're a soccer coach, make sure that you're not just talking about football all the time, especially when the people on the soccer team, like our high school in particular, our football team was like state champions. We were the leftovers. So we were already feeling bad about being kind of the nerds who didn't play football. And then here's our coach coming in and talking about how great he was as a football player. We're not going to trust him ever. Why would we?
And you're not really having the narrative transformation there, right? Because you're kind of telling competing stories.
100%.
You're both like heroes here. Where you really want to do as a leader is you want to step into their story, right?
Yep.
So that you can connect with them.
And like I said, you need both. So I said, like, lead with some empathy. But if you're only about empathy, there's, in the workplace right now, there's a lot of talk about toxic empathy. I think it can go too far. So it's not just about only just being like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, not just empathy. It's empathy for the problem you're trying to solve, and it's authority for the problem you're trying to solve. That's really what we want to think about in that space. When you come in and talk about your story that has nothing to do with my story, you're making yourself a hero. And like you said, we're in competing stories. But the other part about that is you're showing me how insecure you are. And in my story, I need a secure guide. And if you're insecure, I'm out. Because we've all been at like those parties where like I come in and you and I are talking and I'm like, hey, so yeah, I think I'm going to Tokyo in a couple weeks. And you're like, oh, I love Tokyo. That's great. And then somebody jumps in and goes, oh, I lived in Tokyo. Tokyo's the best. Everybody in Tokyo loves me.
Yeah. It's one-upping.
Yeah.
One-upping.
Well, you and I immediately, when we look at that person and are like, let's get away from them. And we know they're insecure and annoying. when we come in as leaders and try to puff up our chest and put out these stories about our successes and our leadership that have nothing to do with the narrative that our team is living in currently, we sound like that person. We are coming in and trying to one up and prove that we're something. And I don't care. You could have won an Olympic gold. If we're not trying to be on the Olympic team, that matters about this much to me.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it all comes back to, like you said, the hero and the guide, especially as a leader and owner you're at. So JJ, pivoting a little bit, you work for StoryBrand, head of StoryBrand for about, I don't know, 10 plus years. And now you're out on your own, really. What is it like in going out on your own with this, and where are you focusing your time?
So yeah, for about 10 years, I worked with Donna Miller at StoryBrand, and I became the head of StoryBrand eventually. And I'm still there as what they refer to as professor in residence. So I still kind of do some teaching and writing. So still very much involved. However, yes, I've launched my own marketing consulting agency and leadership consulting agency called Conscious Brand Agency. Because when it comes to leadership in particular, I very much believe that the favorite leaders that I am drawn to are the ones who do this well when it talks about empathy and authority. They're people who have heart, but are also like a lot of ambition. That's really like kind of the combination that of people I'm looking to work with. People who are like, I want to remain human, I want to love my team and lead people well, but also we're going to get a lot done. We're actually going to win. And I like that combination. So then what I do is I come in and I help them either create, courses or keynote speeches or online workshops that kind of solidify their genius in a way that can actually be taught to other people. And then I also help them with the marketing of that. So that's kind of where I am. And I'm lucky enough in my career that I get to be kind of choosy with, who I work with at this point. And that's the kind of people that I choose to work with are people who really are very conscious, very intentional about the brand and the message that they're putting out there, the leader that they are. And I help them then communicate that in an even stronger way.
And looking back, whether it's through StoryBrand or on your own, share with us a success story. You don't have to give specific names or anything, but just a success story of transformation.
Yeah, I'll say one of the funnest ones for me where I just saw the light come on in people's eyes in a whole new way was I was working with Tempur Sealy. So they're the number one mattress company in the world by far. Like they sell everything. And they wanted to bring StoryBrand in, and they were positioning their mattress and their whole brand using this methodology, like whether it was through Amazon or their own store, how do we position our customer as the hero? And we were teaching this a lot, and all of a sudden they realized that the the one of the main ways that they can dominate the market is through mattress stores. Online, yes, there's a lot of brands out there, other brands that I won't name, but they were competing against, but really where their bread and butter was with stores. So what they would do is they were coming in and they were giving materials to the store owners that in reality positioned Tempur Sealy as the hero. Our mattresses are the best. You should sell more of our mattresses, all of this. And during a workshop, they suddenly realized, wait a minute, we've been positioning our end customer pretty well now as the hero of the story, the people who are going to sleep on mattresses. But when we go and we work with stores, we position us as the hero. What if we created materials that made the owners of the store the heroes of the story? So they want to sell more mattresses, period. So we're going to help them sell more mattresses. Now, we're also going to hope that ours are the ones that they're going to sell more of. But if we're true guides in this whole situation, we need those mattress stores to stay open. We need them to sell more, period. We need more people in their stores buying mattresses. And if they don't, even if that means they're buying somebody else's mattresses. So they revamped all of their materials for store owners, made it easier for their store owners and their team to sell the mattresses, did trainings. I mean, it was just, and then also said the part that we play in this is we're going to keep Tempur Sealy's name high and get people in your stores. So that was a moment for me that was so incredible because both of them ended up having more success when Tempur Sealy saw themselves as the guide in the story instead of the hero. They tried to go in and go, sell more of our mattresses. Our mattresses are great. And when they flipped the switch a little bit, the mattress store owners won and Tempur Sealy won. They started to be able to gain more market share. And that just tiny switch in their marketing in that one segment made a huge impact.
I like it. I really do, because it's also like they kind of gave up control a little bit. You know, gave up control and not just sell our stuff, sell our stuff, sell our stuff. Let's do what's best for our customer. And in return, the whole go giver, whatever you want to call it, it ended up working out for them too. So it's a
Yeah.
win-win for everybody.
And let me repeat again something I said earlier, but I don't want to gloss over it. The guide is the strongest character in the story. Truthfully, that is, if you think about it, Obi-Wan Kenobi is the strongest, Yoda is the strongest, Dumbledore's the strongest, Haymitch is the strongest in the Hunger Games story, Aslan in, Chronicles of Narnia. Those are the guides. Those are the strongest characters. The story arc is about the hero, but the strongest character is the guide. When you get to play the guide, not only do you get to be the strongest character, but you get to help other people win and you win in the process. And that to me is the most glorious thing I can do with my life.
Yeah, and whether it's as a parent, whether it's as a leader, you're making a difference. I think as a leader, when you're doing that, you're helping people stretch and take themselves to new levels. I think it's amazing. This has been awesome. Before we wrap up, what is one piece of advice that you have for a leader that they can just do after watching this to just make their being just a little bit better beyond just the hero and a guide, which we've talked about, which is the main thing. But what is one little tip or trick you have?
The thing that I genuinely believe is the best thing I can give you is any time that you are getting ready to communicate anything in an email, stand up in a meeting, get on a stage in front of people, don't sit down first and go, what am I going to say? Start with what problem is I trying to solve for the people who are listening? So if you're walking into a team meeting, what problem are we trying to solve? Or are they trying to solve? If you're about to send an email to somebody, what problem are they trying to solve? And then write that down. If I'm going to sell even like one of my consultations to a company or a leader, I will start an email. I won't start an email with, hey, it's great. It's great to meet you. I'm Dr. JJ. No, I start with so many thought leaders have incredible value that they have to offer the world, but they don't know how to put it in a course or a book in a way that people are going to buy. I might start that way. Or if it's with a company that I'm going to work with marketing, I might say something like, so many companies have incredible products, but they're so close to them that they have a hard time explaining it to the customers in a way that makes them want to buy. That's it. Just start with the problem of the team, the people that you're communicating with. Then talk about what you're going to do for them in that. And that's again in one-on-one meeting, in a team meeting, when you're getting up on a stage at a conference, or you're sending an email. If you want to make them the hero of the story, if you want them to experience narrative transportation, always start with a problem they're experiencing that you can help them solve.
Start with the problem. Don't start with features and benefits, please.
100%. 100%.
Please. Yeah, I mean, people don't want that. This has been awesome, Dr. JJ. Where can our audience connect with you at?
Two different places. So, drjjpeterson.com and doctor is DR. So drjjpeterson.com is where my agency is housed. And then also, I started a podcast called Badass Softy that really is for leaders who are unapologetically driven, but lead with heart. And so those are kind of the two places, drjjpeterson.com or listen to Badass Softy.
Or do both.
Or do both.
Yeah, right. And which I have, and I'll put that in the show notes. And so, listeners, here's what I want to challenge you with, especially if you're a leader. Are you approaching your situation as a hero or a guide and be honest with yourself and go into that next meeting and start with the problem, like Dr. JJ said, and put yourself into the other person's story, right? And that's where the narrative transportation will take place. And that's a huge part of getting the story right, which is the most powerful way to create action, right, Dr. JJ?
Yep.
So this has been awesome. Thank you so much. And as I always like to say, stay curious, keep learning, and have a great day. Thank you.
You can level up your storytelling skills very quickly. Really just adopt a few of my strategies that I teach, and people will instantly recognize you as better than